Washington, D.C. has just tipped its hand and blew it. Up until now, the story has been, we need to go into Venezuela on behalf of democracy and to save the people of Venezuela. Well, that wasn't working. Nobody was buying it. The American people weren't buying it. The people in Venezuela weren't buying it. The world wasn't buying it. So now they're desperate. So what do? Now they have to say that Venezuela is some direct threat to the United States. In a statement, our Secretary of State has said that we are obligated to fight Hezbollah in Venezuela. Well, that's a whole different thing. See, what that does is that pits the American people against the Venezuelan people. Now, some of you might be asking, well, we know that Venezuela has had dealings with Iran. Yes, they have had dealings with Iran. Do you know why? The sanctions. They had no other options. They had to go to countries that weren't affected by the sanctions to deal with the collapse in oil prices in 14 and 15. That's why they are getting medicines from India. That's why they are shipping coltan to Italy. That's why they are buying tons and tons, tens of thousands of tons of wheat from Russia. That's why they are getting loans from China. They didn't have any other option because the U.S. forced their hand. And I will link those sanctions, and I'll link them again, I should say, and you can read them for yourself. This is the game the U.S. has always tried to play. Demonize, back people into a corner, and then when they don't have any other option, then run the spin masters out. But the U.S. did it way too fast this time, and they have gone to the well once too often. They have a problem with this opposition that they can't fix. The largest political group in Venezuela are the Chavistas. Whether you like them or not, they are the largest group. The opposition is a conglomeration of a bunch of different groups that can never get on the same page. And that's why they always fissure and crack. That's why the U.S. had to do this quickly. And if they didn't do it quickly, it was going to fall apart just like it did in 2002. They knew they had to have the military on their side. And here in the United States, it's starting to come out. There are people in Miami now saying, you know what, we don't like Nicolas Maduro any more than you do. But we sure as hell don't want the U.S. interfering in our personal problems, in our sovereign problems, which is what the world has been saying all along. This is not the business of the United States. This is why the U.S. had to cook up this story about Hezbollah. Now, there's this other story about evil, terrible, horrible Nicolas Maduro is blocking the bridge for humanitarian aid, and he must really want to starve his people. It's terrible. Yeah. You see, there's this thing called the internet, and it keeps track of things that happened in the past. Let me read for you. The official who headed the United States Humanitarian Aid Program for the rebels in Nicaragua, this is back in the 80s, said today that he twice ordered his planes to shuttle weapons for the Contras in Central America at the direction of, oh no, our good friend Elliot Abrams. You know, the U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela? This is what they were doing. They were shipping military equipment to the Contras in planes labeled humanitarian aid. And that's fact. That's history. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they have just pulled a nice hefty cache of weapons off of a plane that took off in Miami and landed in Caracas. The National Guard of Venezuela outed this plan. And today, they have also released the 2 confessions of the people that tried to kill Nicolas Maduro last year. It is not looking good for the United States and their regime change plans right now. They are getting very, very desperate. The mistake they made, and I say mistake relatively, back when they tried to overthrow Hugo Chavez in 2002, is they didn't have the backing of the military. See, they had a random guy back then, too. His name was Pedro Carmonas, and he issued the Carmona Decree literally upon taking office. And that decree suspended the Constitution. And does anyone remember me talking about some woman named Machado? Well, guess who signed the Carmona Decree? That's right. Some woman named Machado put her name on the Carmona Decree during the last illegal coup that the United States tried to run in Venezuela. And that's who is trying to be run out now, alongside random guy named Juan. I will give you a link to these sanctions, and you can see how far back they go, and you can see how devastating they have been to the people of Venezuela. Now, on top of doing all of this, destroying so many lives, killing so many people, our government wants you to believe that the people of Venezuela are now the enemy of the people of the United States. This is why I've said Washington, D.C. is a cancer. I wish they would take this U.S. off everything, just say D.C. Department of State, and put D.C. on everything, because they no longer represent us. They are a tiny, tiny group of people that have gotten way too big for their britches. And we have an enormous problem that no one is talking about. There are a couple dozen tankers sitting at anchor with Venezuelan oil off the coast of Louisiana. A year or two ago, I talked about the Fourth Fleet being underfunded. These paramilitaries in Colombia have these semi-submersible submarines, and they've got lots of them, and they're very hard to detect. If something would happen down here with one of these tankers, you can guarantee DC would attempt to tie it to Venezuela somehow. So keep your eyes open for this, because they wouldn't have any problem destroying the Gulf again to get their way, to sway the opinion of the American people. Because they would make one of two allegations. They would say either it was done on purpose by Hezbollah, if one of these tankers would just somehow explode or somehow collide with another one, or they would say, oh, the poor management of the government of Venezuela, these pilots don't know how to guide their ships properly, and that's another reason we need to go do regime change for the safety of all. This is coming because they're desperate. They are hoping that you aren't going to pay attention, that you're going to start to ignore and look at other things. Please don't. The U.S., in this particular case, has bitten off way more than it can chew, and it's starting to realize that. And these guys in our government, especially this one, don't care. They want to win. Our leader just went out and made this ridiculous allegation that the United States is not a socialist country and never will be. Now, given that there are multiple definitions of what a socialist country is, a good general definition is a country that allows its government to interject itself into the free market. What do you think these sanctions are? There has been more socialism come out of our government that has affected more free markets in the world than has ever existed in Venezuela. Ever. I could do a video that would be an hour long, and I could give you 20, 25, 30 direct points that show exactly how socialist we are. The acronym that I used was before, speaking of this, was trails. Taxed, regulated, approved, insured, inspected, licensed, secured, and subsidized. TRAIILSS. Literally every step along the way in the quote-unquote free market in the United States, the U.S. government, Washington, D.C., interjects itself. I could also make the allegation that we are a socialist dictatorship as well, because these last couple of elections have proved that your vote means nothing because of the Electoral College. And given that the Electoral College is made up of people determined by the RNC and the DNC, not elected officials, I could probably make a very good argument before a court that we are a dictatorship, knowing that the Republicans and Democrats work together. I've called it the Republicrat tyranny before, and I've seen a lot of you come to my comment section and agree. They just use tricks of psychological operations to make you believe something that isn't true. Bread and circuses. Their whole definition of success and failure is how wealthy someone is. This is the game they're trying to play. And as long as I have breath and the ability, I am going to attempt to educate people to this. They don't have a viable solution for who would rule after Maduro would go, even if they got rid of him. What are they going to do about the 6 or 8 million Chavistas that live in that country? You think they're just going to roll over? Even if somehow they were able to miraculously get the military on their side, they have 1.6 million militia under arms that aren't going to accept people they didn't vote for. And we're trying to put somebody in charge down there who has a verifiable history of using humanitarian aid to ship weapons. And this is actually from my area. This little article down here is August 15, 1987. I could do a video just on Noriega, just what led up to it, and go for an hour. But trust me when I tell you, this game plan has been tried before. And it failed. And I'm telling you, folks, please, don't get distracted. Other countries in the world are seeing this. This is a French oil company. And they're starting to pay the price for the U.S. sanctions. So I will leave it there. And I'll let you folks make your own decision for yourself. Like, share, subscribe.